Hi there, it's Deborah Irene, and it's Memorial Weekend 2020. And I wanted to invite you to story time today, so thank you for being here. I was thinking today about Memorial Day and trying to remember what it's really about. And those of us in the workforce, we get a 4-day weekend. Of course, lately we've been getting a lot of time at home and off. And we all know that Memorial Day is so much more than just an extra day off. It's really a time to remember military personnel who have given their lives for our country, and a time to remember our loved ones who have passed on as well. And I try to take time to do that on the Memorial Day weekend. Today I'm going to read to you a story from my book, Someday I Will Write. And it's in the section that I have not read from yet, called A Time to Let Go. And in this section, I do speak a lot about the passing of loved ones, people that I knew, their losses. But the very first chapter in this section is about a regret that I had and something that I've had to learn to let go of. And the flashback happened to be rekindled in my mind several years ago, about 9 years ago, on Memorial Weekend. And I mentioned that at the end of the story. It's a military story, and some of you may or may not know that I was in the military for a couple of years. And sometimes when I am in a setting, a group social setting, I've been at ballroom dances sometimes on Veterans Day and different days, and they want you to stand up if you're a veteran. And sometimes I'm reluctant to do that because I feel like I was never in combat, and I don't feel like I am in the same category as someone who really gave their life. I had, in my mother's book, Helen's Heritage, she talks about her brothers who were in the military, a couple of them career men. And one of them was in World War II, a prisoner of war, and how he had to escape from being held as a prisoner of war. And so there's stories in her book about her brothers serving in the military. And when I joined for the benefits, and it was at the tail end of the Vietnam era. And I didn't have to go into battle, and although I've been very patriotic, I just don't feel like I'm in quite the same category that they are. And before I read you the story, I want to mention one other young man and this was really hard for me, I think hit home more than anything else. There was a young man that I drove to ball practices who was a friend of my oldest son's and lived in the same neighborhood. And he was killed in Afghanistan. I think it's been about eight years ago. I mean, he gave the ultimate sacrifice. And for someone that you watched grow up, that's hard, and it hits home, and you realize the sacrifice they made. I was trying to find a picture of me in the military today, so I was going through an old chest, and I came across, and you won't be able to see this real well. This picture was taken in I believe 80 or 81, and that is me as a young woman in her 20s. And yes, cameras were not good then, and this was taken back a ways, so you can't even tell it's me. But maybe you can tell what that says on the top. And I pulled that out, and I thought, oh my goodness, what a gem. It's One World Trade Center. And so I have a picture of me standing in front of One World Trade Center And of course, that was long before 9/11. And, that's a solemn moment too, to remember. So let's get into our story today. Again, as I said, it's from my book, Someday I Will Write. And it's from the section, A Time to Let Go. And it's chapter 34. The title of the chapter is Of Flags and Regret. Oh, to have the wisdom of 50-something when we are but only 19. It was 4:15 p.m. and had been a slow day that I was anxious to see end. I shifted things on my desk and stacked folders to be audited in the morning on the left corner when the telephone rang. It was Captain Reynolds. Specialist, you need to report to Main Post Headquarters in the morning at 7:30. One thing you learn in the military is to never question your commanding officer. Yes, sir, I'll be there. Someone from West Point wants to talk with you. Go to room 234. It wasn't the first time I had been called to an out-of-the-ordinary meeting. The last time I was asked if I would pose for a joint military recruitment poster. I agreed, but never heard from them again, so I wondered what this meeting could be about. The next morning, I arrived 15 minutes early in combat fatigues, strange attire for a finance job in a regular office setting, but was quite appropriate for the 1st Infantry Division. It was a crisp October morning, and I was glad I had remembered to wear my field jacket. I stopped to remove an orange maple leaf stuck in the lace of my boot as I opened the door into headquarters and headed up the stairs. I slipped through the open door of Office 234 and saw a 40-ish looking man with a thick black mustache and silver colonel insignia on his collar, flipping through a folder. He looked up and said, "Specialist, Colonel Smith here. Please have a seat. I need to ask you a few questions." He was matter of fact, yet polite. "Why did you join the Army?" I was certain he didn't want to be thrust into all the details. I came from a very simple life in a small town where finances were limited, and less than a quarter of the girls attended college. The majority got married or found jobs. I was a good student, however, and intended to attend a 4-year university after graduation. My well-meaning intention lacked appropriate knowledge and planning. I hadn't a clue on the process required to apply, be accepted, and attend a formal university. Somehow I fell through the cracks when it came to receiving guidance for this process during my high school years, which angered a very supportive business teacher when she learned of my alternative plan. I squashed an engagement with my high school sweetheart as I entered my senior year and yearned for something different. A taste of the real world. I didn't want to be trapped in the cocoon of small-town philosophy, so I shocked my family and friends and joined the military. It was a far cry from dresses, marching shoes, baton-twirling ice skates, and a lifelong dream of dancing. Joining the military in the mid-70s appealed to me because I could use the GI Bill to fund my education a few years later. I scored high on the entrance exam and was allowed to attend advanced training in any field desired, except auto mechanics. I didn't pass that portion of the test. I think I could today, but I didn't then. After basic training and extended training in finance, I was assigned to a regular position where I worked and interacted with civilians even though I was in the Army. I enjoyed military life and my work and enrolled in night courses at a nearby state university. I coasted according to plan until I met that one man. I spared the colonel and modestly answered to travel and receive educational benefits. Well, at this pace, it's going to take you a decade to finish your degree. We have another way in mind. I felt like he had a video play-by-play of my life as he prodded with various questions. What was the meaning of this? Almost a half hour into the session, I realized I was being interviewed to be in the first graduating class at West Point, to include female cadets. At the end of the session, he said I was an acceptable candidate. He concluded, "You are the only person on this post being interviewed, and we are taking only 4 or 5 in total. We feel it is best to do a trial run with women who are already exposed to military life. Much planning and orientation is required prior to the next session. I am sorry, but you have only 2 weeks to confirm the appointment." Well, this should have been a no-brainer, but at 19, the 8-year commitment seemed an eternity. To add to my confusion, that one man returned to town and had no desire to be held captive by military life. At the beginning of the summer, I left for a 2-week leave in June to attend my best friend's wedding in the neighboring state, Missouri. He left at the same time for New York to visit his family. I returned as scheduled after the wedding and waited for his call, and waited and waited. Long before the day of cell phones, there was no way to reach out to him. I only knew his name, had never met his parents, and my attempts at finding a phone number for them failed. I was emotionally exhausted and filled my spare time with designing and sewing a wedding gown for a ceremony we had planned in the coming winter, a gown that was never worn. I crafted several scenarios in my mind of what might have happened to him, but ultimately accepted that I had been dumped. It had been a long, depressing summer. I resolved not to accept the appointment. Quite frankly, I didn't realize the opportunity that I let slip away until years later. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance that would not come again. I was in love and chose my heart over my head. I set my course with this decision and lived the traditional family life. It was not a bad choice. I married that one man 2 months later at the local courthouse, and I left the military the following year. My shoes changed from combat boots to high heels in the corporate world. 10 years passed, and we were blessed with a healthy baby boy. Within 5 years, another 2 sons completed our family. I donned sneakers, left my corporate career, and celebrated life with bottles, diapers, Disney movies, and a treasured minivan. But 6 years later, I sobbed and was rattled with fear when I realized I would have to return to the business world. Holy cow, corporate life had changed from Selectric typewriters and mainframe systems to a personal computer on every desk. I had to start all over from scratch, at the bottom. It occurred to me that by the time our first son was born, I would have been well beyond the 8-year West Point commitment, and I had already had a successful business career. I dried my tears as I exchanged sneakers for high heels once again. A year later, I was in full swing, switching between high heels in the daytime and baseball cleats at night On the weekends, as I juggled into the roles, at night and on the weekends, as I juggled the roles of wife, career woman, mom, and baseball manager. It was a life overflowed with much joy. Then one day, I faced the empty nest and a divorce all at one time. I pondered life's decisions, past, present, and future, and reflected on not achieving my potential in that very first career. I lived for the moment rather than the future, and maybe that is and was the better road. I appreciated the blessings of a family life, but perhaps could have had both. Last Memorial Day, I embarked on a day's journey to attend a family reunion in my small hometown. The memory of a lost opportunity smacked me in the face as I circled the on-ramp to the interstate. Right there in the wide open plain, twice the size of a football field, a sea of American flags was planted into the ground. More flags than one could count, rows and rows of Old Glory blowing out in full honor, standing at attention. Patriotism and pride rose from within my soul as I remembered. And it struck me. I might have worked in the Pentagon and White House or retired a general by now. I should have tried for it all. But I didn't. And so that was a regret that I have to let go of. And for my writer friends, I wrote this little section and it's a little bit longer than most of the verbiage that I put at the end of my chapters explaining why this was written, because I wrote this story many different ways. So let me just read that to you. I composed the story several different ways for different things, and at one point in 2011, submitted this version as a short story contest entry for the magazine Real Simple. I also posted a blog version without the dialogue in November 2011 for Veterans Day and titled it One Thing I Regret. When I learned it was not selected as the winner for the contest, although it did not win, I enjoy rereading this story. It reminds me that we all have opportunities and choices in life, and sometimes there is fate, luck, and destiny. In the end, the most important thing is to find peace with it all. So that's my Memorial Weekend story of Flags and Regret. It's Deborah Irene, and thank you for joining me for story time.